Hello and welcome to the first tutorial series on this channel. What I want to go through with this series is different key elements of producing trance music, but also electronic dance music in general. Trance music is mostly a factor because it's my main background over the past years, but that doesn't mean that the knowledge and concepts aren't transferable to other EDM genres. This series is mostly going to be for beginners. Intermediates might find interesting ideas and concepts here that they haven't thought about, but this will mostly be focused towards beginners, so don't wonder if there are things that might seem obvious to you, because they might not to some, and especially not to beginners. This will be structured in a way that I want to seek for a certain topic that I found very interesting or relevant and really deep dive into them. I don't want to do a full walkthrough on how to produce a track that might come as a different series at some later point. But what I want this to be is, okay, this is a topic that I find relevant or interesting for beginners in that case. And so let's go through this in a first presentation to kind of go through the little base concepts, how this all works, and what the main idea behind this is. And then at a second step, I will try to put everything in practice by showing different projects of mine, maybe doing a new project in FL Studio and showing what I did right on that and what I did wrong on that and how to do better and just do it right, kind of. For the first iteration of this, I want to talk about how to give room to your mix, which is kind of at the end of the process, but I still found it kind of interesting and just wanted to do a video about it because I mainly thought about that for a project that I'm doing right now and just encountered the same problem that you're facing kind of always when you're trying to measure those things up. So what do I mean when I talk about room in your mix? Room refers to frequencies on the one hand and volume on the other hand. Frequencies in the sense that every instrument and every synthesizer and every stab effect that you'd use has its own frequencies it uses. You want to make sure that you kind of tidy up with your frequencies and how everything works together. But I'll go more into detail about that a bit later. Also, you want to balance out your volumes, having things that should stand in the foreground of your track, being a bit louder and a bit more up front than the less relevant background elements. That being said, it's important that you accentuate certain elements of your mix. You want to make sure that certain elements in your mix just come through. They need to catch attention of your listener just by the fact how they are designed and put in the foreground. If elements are not important, even think about removing them. Basic way to say this would be put as many things and elements in your track as you need to convey your basic idea and to tell your story. But if you encounter elements that don't really seem necessary and that don't fit your concept too perfectly, remove them. It's better than having them muddying up your mix. To make this concept a bit easier, I kind of want to divide the kinds of instruments and stabs and effects you use into foreground and background, or foreground and atmosphere, foreground and ambience, however you want to put this. But what do I mean with foreground? Well, imagine this whole picture you see right here being your song. This whole frame is your song. And then you have the kind of framed part in the middle where you're kind of focused on. When you look at this picture, it's the first point you look at is, okay, why is that thing there? That is your foreground. It's what grabs your listener's attention. It's what wants to portray the main idea of your track, while the rest adds to the feeling, and the rest just kind of supports how your foreground is perceived by the listener, but it's not really just jumping into his face. That being said, your foreground is what gives your listener an orientation through your track. For example, your main melody that's playing from start to end, your listener can already make out just from the main melody when it gets faster paced, when the main lead is reached, when you're still in the intro, when you want to bring up which emotion, that's what you do with that. You also have the rhythm in the front, which makes the people dance. You just give something to dance along to sing along to, and just to party on. You have to have a foreground to focus on to do that. Now, as I already mentioned a few elements, there are elements that definitely belong in the foreground. And that is definitely the kick, which is the rhythm element that plays on the low end and really pumps through your whole mix and pushes it out. Then you have the percussion, also the rhythmic element, but percussion just happens on the higher end. It's a great way to give rhythm without just throwing in the whole pumping kick and bass line. For example, in a breakdown in a trance track where you just want silence, maybe a few strings that are playing, you want to convey feeling and calmness, instead of throwing a kick in your listener's face at 128 BPM. So what you want to do is just throw in a bit of percussion on top and it will give rhythm without clogging up the mix. Then you'll have your lead melody, which is just playing everything, and you have the bass line, which is somewhere between your kick and your main melody, because yes, it is providing rhythm at a low end level of your track just as well as the kick, but it will support the melody chord progression wise by the way it is built and written. That being said, they have clear spots in the mix and stand out, and what makes them up, what they kind of have in common. Listen to any track you want. You will know where the kick is, where the rhythm is. You will in most cases know where the main melody is. That's your foreground. But there's not only foreground. There's also, taking the picture as an example again, there's the ocean. There's the things that are around. But how do you define ambience? How do you define atmosphere? Think about atmosphere for a second for yourself. What is atmosphere for you? Not only in music, but in real life. It may be air, it may be a smell, it may be a feeling, it may be just something around you, but you most likely won't be able to identify it. You know it's there, and you may like it, you may not like it, you may feel comfortable, uncomfortable, but it's not really something you can hold on to. You can not really describe it. Take for example the concert. You come from the concert and you say, well, the concert was so great, it's such great atmosphere, I really enjoyed it. But what is the atmosphere? Can you explain it? Can you really describe what happened there, why you feel that? Not really. Still, it's there and it's undeniable. It's captivating. It's what keeps you contained within the concert, within the situation you're in your own feelings. And it's a very important thing to trance music. Because if you look at trance music, you want your listener to be catched onto it. You want to bring him into trance. And to do that, the main melody is just not enough. You need those big and broad atmospheric sounds all around you. And they catch him. And they keep the listener just right as engaged as he was right from the moment in the beginning, and then he can focus. But it doesn't steal his focus. It just keeps him attended to the whole track while he still for himself focuses on the main melody or the rhythm. So you want your atmospheres to be subtle, you want your atmospheres to be wide and everywhere around, and you don't want them to be too defined. So you may have broad pad, but you don't want as atmosphere plugs that are clearly just playing that main melody, because then it's a lead plug. Things that might belong to the atmospheres in that case are pads, as I said, but it's not only pads. And what I wrote down on this certain slide might be something a few musicians might kill me for. Yes, I did not really divide between effects and atmosphere, but that has a basic idea to it. And that is that effects, and the way effects affect the listener, differ based on how you put them. If you have a massive impact on the beginning of a drop, yeah, it's an effect, it's an impact. But if you put a heavy reverb on it, move it right way of the front, just far back into the background of your track, then it will be atmosphere. The listener will detect it. He will be like, okay, that was a sound, but he won't be attached to it. He won't really focus on that. He won't lose focus on the melody, and that kind of makes it atmosphere. You also have little stabs and effects that jump from left to right on the stereo spectrum, but they do neither add to the transitions, nor do they really support the melody or the whole foreground. They just fill up the track a bit and give a bit of density and everything to it. And as I already mentioned about 30 times within the last few sentences, what they have in common is they are in the back. They are not your foreground. They are clearly differentiable as Yeah, okay, they are there, they are kind of important, but yeah, they're not the main issue of the track. But that also leads to problems. As I said, you want your frequencies tidied, and I will explain how to do that a bit later. But if your atmospheres are that broad, and if your atmospheres play kind of everywhere, low end, mids, highs, effects, pads, they clog up your mix, don't they? And yes, they do, and they will make for a very, very chaotic mix if you don't carefully plan how to put them, and carefully plan their loudness, carefully plan the frequencies they are allowed to play in. But don't get too worried about it, you need them. Most trance tracks wouldn't work if you had no atmosphere in them, and many other EDM tracks will at least gain from atmosphere. In a sense that when you can, let's say a more basic EDM track, and you want to go and build up into your drop, and you haven't really had atmosphere before, so you had your kicks, you had your driving bass, and you had your melody, and everything was kind of playing together and pushing the overall feeling. Atmospheres are a great way to push onto that even more, to even increase the power of what you just heard right before the drop. Mostly only in the top end, but they will be able to support it, and they will support the feeling. As I said, trance tracks as the better example, it will push the whole track to a new level if you do that. So, still, you don't want to overdo it. If you increase the loudness too much, and if you overdo all that, then you will lose your listener's interest, you will lose your listener's rhythmic feeling of your track, and you will lose his attention on why to listen, because he just can't focus on what he's hearing right now. So be careful about that and how you put all that. So the next important thing to do is you want to keep your mix clear. But how can you go about that? Well, I will go through a set of different techniques on this. The first one for this video being EQing, and I'll have a few other techniques that I'll explain in the next slide, explain in the next video that I'll upload, then hopefully with a shorter presentation with less talking on my end and a bit more content on your end. So when you're doing EQing, you are setting the volumes of different frequencies for your instrument. It allows you to control which frequencies are playing on which instrument and how to move them around to just kind of set that amount of room that I was talking about. Filtering is more or less harshly cutting off parts of your low or high end depending on the filter you use. I will go into that. That is as well a great effect, but also can help to clear your mix. You have volume automation, where you, for example, have a plug playing silently in the intro of your track and then gradually getting louder over your track and building the main plug and main melody over the kind of rest of the song. You might have a sidechain, which is volume ducking in opposition to other elements. So let's say you have a kick and you want to duck the volume of the other elements so the kick comes through more. That's something I'll also go about in a later video. Mastering is something I want to move out of the whole context, because yes, it does heavily improve on the clearness of your track when you master it. But mastering a track that wasn't optimized in the first place is a horrible experience and doesn't work out well, so you want a clear track before you start mastering. That's why I moved that out there. The next thing you want to do is, I mentioned like 2 or 3 times, clearly separate your foreground and your background. Make clear what is atmosphere, what is foreground, because it helps you decide what to make loud and what not. Okay, you could only go there by ear and just listen to it and decide what to make louder, what to make more silent. But if you really take the time to divide off what is fore and what is background, it will speed up the process and really help you out a bit. So, I want to go about EQing now. As I said, it's all about volume and frequencies. And I explained EQing a bit. It's just setting the volume for different frequencies. That means control over both key factors. It's the most obvious choice to work on, and so we'll dive into this. You want every instrument to have its own frequency spectrum. Take for example a hi-hat. A hi-hat is a pretty high sound, but even the highest hi-hat has a set of low frequencies that are just floating around the space. They are not relevant to the listener in most cases, but they are there, just by nature. By using careful equalizing, you can remove the top end of your hi-hat and thus kind of clear up the frequencies that come below it. Same thing being for the bass line. If you know that this certain synthesizer of your bass line will work mostly on the low end up to, I don't know, 5000 Hz or something, you want to go from the low through to the mids, then you might want to cut the upper end of it because you don't want to collide with your percussion and maybe a top melody or something. To go about that, I talked about hertz. This is the frequency spectrum. You divide the spectrum of frequencies in hertz, and you have a more or less clear definition in which part, which kind of sounds belong and are put. It is not that standardized, however, how you interpret the borders between the different kind of sections. I took the kind of way that FL Studio interprets this by referencing their parametric equalizer 2, which is an equalizing plugin by them, which has a set of bars on top dividing the different frequency areas, and this is what I use to build this. I won't talk too much about that. I think most of this is self-explanatory. So supersonic is on top. It's so far above the main, so the overall frequencies that most sounds will have, that some people won't be able to even listen to that, to even hear it. It's really high frequencies that most equalizers don't even allow you to set. While down to the subsonic, you go so far below the sub area that you most likely won't use the sound anymore. So somewhere between that is the spectrum. You can just use this for reference later on. As I said, you want to cut unnecessary frequencies. Take your hi-hat, you want to cut those low ends, you don't need them. Take your bass line, cut those high ends, you don't need them. On the other hand, maybe your lead is playing so perfectly in the middle layer and it's not too far jumping up or down or something. You may want to lower it on top and end and just keep the middle bands. This is kind of an example for a way to divide these things. You want to have your sub bass and kick in the subsection in most cases, while the bass just does the low section, the lead is playing in the middle. It may stretch even up to the top. That is not a problem at all. It's kind of differing from track to track. If you have a melody that's really filling the room and that's taking up all the space in the middle and the high ends, it's okay, it's perfectly fine. But you may also, if you want to, just put the main lead in the middle section and drop a top melody just above it. If you have even more, if you go even higher, then you have the percussion like hi-hats and stuff, and that's just playing in the even higher frequency spectrums, and you really want to cut that. So you kind of cut the high frequencies there. You also cut the middle frequencies kind of in that area, cut the low frequencies here, so you're just cutting everywhere and thus clearing up your mix a bit. How you cut that, however, is a sense that you'll develop yourself. Yes, there are certain frequency borders that are common to use, but you shouldn't really focus on that too much. You shouldn't stick to those clear references. You should make it up for yourself for every track, listen to it and make up for how you want to go about this, how you feel on this. Okay. Now we want to go on a case study on how I did this in the track The Lagoon. This will also be my reference track when we go about sidechaining and stuff, but for now I will go about equalizing only and we'll take a quick dive into my track and just see what I mean on that, and then talk about what I did there. This is the project of my track The Lagoon that I published a few months ago. And I chose this project because it, in my opinion, shows pretty well how to deal with atmospheres and why you need them and why you need to carefully separate your track but still know when to use them.
This track is pretty simple. It has pretty few playlist tracks, and it really doesn't use too many effects. It doesn't use too much automation. It doesn't use, I don't know, it's just pretty basic in many ways, and just drags a lot of energy from the way the melody sounds and the amount of atmosphere in the background, because it fills up the holes that the very oversimplified structure of the track leaves. So, that being said, if you play the intro of this track and you mute out the atmospheres, then you will definitely hear. However, adding those textures for themselves really helps. But still, we have different elements going on that will collide in their frequency spectrums. It isn't as bad in this track, because if we really break this down, what the only things that could really clash would be, I don't know, the hi-hat, the percussion looping, also maybe parts of the plucks because they play in high end, and also parts of the bass because they play in high end. But as there are so few elements, the clash isn't that bad. They don't hit up too hard. Still, this simple project makes it easy for me to grab out a track and show what I did there. And I will take the hi-hat. And take a look at this closed hi-hat. If we play that through, the first one sounds like this. And is supported by a second hi-hat like this. On both hi-hats you find a Fruity Parametric Equalizer 2, which is an equalizing plugin that I use to take care of cutting off the lower frequencies. Taking this, you will hear that the closed hi-hat 1 does have a bit of low end. Let's start like this. And if I slowly move up the slider here, you will hear that a tad of low end is fading, but that doesn't mean that we lose the overall hi-hat here. So, yes, we removed a lot of the low end, but as it wasn't a main part or main feature of the sound anyway, it doesn't hurt us too much. Now you could also say, yeah, okay, but if it's just not a main feature, then it's also not that loud, so it doesn't clog up the mix that much, so why would I remove it? And the assumption is kinda right, but only kind of. Because if you don't remove it, and you think so for every single instrument, and especially you're producing a trance track, which would mean that you have lots and lots of instruments running around, and you don't clean it up, then you have like 20 instruments that muddy up the same frequency range, and that will stack for sure. So you lose a lot of clarity in your track that you could have saved if you just spent the little amount of time to cut that off. I did the same thing for the other hi-hat, if you hear there. And that thing definitely has its own part of low end. But it's not hurting the overall mix. So I just cut that off. And in that sense now, that area is clear on both hi-hats, and we really focus them on their own area. The other thing, and that one did clash definitely, is the harder bass line that sets in here. If you remember this section, it sounds like this. He's playing also at high. And those two work together because I cut frequencies from the intro hard bass that you see below. If you look at the parametric equalizer I put on it, then you see that I cut parts of the high-end frequencies. And you hear if I add them back. So it sounds like this. Coming through the mix a bit more and is a bit more hearable and visible. That does definitely help a bit, and it's up to your careful listening to find out how far to remove certain frequencies. Also, I cut all the subsonic that you find down here, because it does muddy up the bigs. Also, you don't need that. It's not the sub frequency you're looking for. You already have a sub. It's pretty dense and it's enough. You don't need the subsonic frequencies. They won't be present in most speakers anyway, or they will just drown somewhere. So this is a good way to clean this up. So I hope, even though this was really just a short look into this, that you get a slight feeling for why you would use EQing and really cut the frequencies on the top and high end, or even in other sections like the middle, and how it may help to clean your overall track.
So, this was the first kind of improvised tutorial. I hope I could show you at least a bit of what I mean with that. I know the project isn't the perfect example for that, but I hope it was still a way to show you or give you a basic insight in what I did there. I will find or take time with some other project in the future and to kind of decipher what I did there, and hope that that works out a bit better. Also, regarding sidechaining and the other things, I will kind of put different things in a single video. Hope that I have a bit more to show there than I had today, and that I feel a bit more comfortable with it and just can engage a bit more in it and just present a bit more than with that project where I kind of realized in the middle that it wasn't that much to equalize. So, however, I wish you a great evening, day, or whenever you watch this. If you like this video, subscribe to the channel to see more videos, and if you didn't feel like that, just take the time and check out 1 or 2 tracks that are also posted on this channel, and just maybe let me know what you think about it. Feedback helps me out a lot. Great evening or day, and I'll see you in the next one.